I'm here to get today again for a follow-up call with the illustrious and lovely Liz Lambert, with a little alliteration as well. Liz, welcome back.
Thank you, Vinny.
So what's on the card now?
Well, Vinny, you know how I actually thought at the time that putting the Crafar Farm conspiracy headline was a little OTT, but I absolutely not. I would have never have believed it if I hadn't lived it. I think when I spoke to you last time, we were in the process of, the receivers' lawyers were in the process of trying to get before the court, and what they wanted the court to declare the sale and purchase agreements null and void. They went about that in a very devious way. They brought a whole lot of these claims about that I was destroying the farm's business, that I was maliciously saying that I owned the farms, and et cetera, et cetera. Because they didn't want to come out and say, well, you know, what's really bothering us are these sale and purchase agreements. In the end, they, through a series of moves, in the end, they dropped all of that because we argued it in the interlocutory, which is the sort of in-between stages of the main event. And it was quite clear that they had nothing to base them on, because I was saying, well, everything I did in terms of writing letters to the share milkers, telling actually talking about it, putting stuff online, talking to people about it, concluding leases, etc., putting caveats on, was all to do with the fact that my sale and purchase agreements were legal documents, and I was telling the truth. So we got down to that in the end, and it was set down for a 3-day hearing. Well, it got disposed of in one day because in the meantime I had actually transferred 4 of the farms. Well, I hadn't transferred them. The transfer is executed by the Crafars to me of 4 of the farms, and I have leased them back to them on 99-year leases. So they went through the LIN system. The receivers got most upset and said, "Oh, that's breaching the undertaking." Well, the lawyers for the receiver said, "That's breaching the undertaking that she gave, and she should be jailed." So if there was any for breach what do they call it? The court, contempt of court. Well, it would actually only be a civil contempt anyway. So I mean, the whole thing of jailing somebody over a civil contempt is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like, come on, I'm just being a little bit contemptuous.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't even going to admit that, because I said when I signed I was quite careful that before I went ahead and went with the transfers, which I hadn't thought of doing before then, I had a look at that, and it didn't say that I couldn't transfer any of the titles. It said that I shouldn't deal with any of the titles so as to stop the sale, right? So then on the cross-examination, when Mr. Stewart had me up there in the dock saying, well, isn't it true that you've breached your undertaking here? And I said, no, I haven't actually. I said, for a start, I haven't specifically said I wouldn't transfer or get a transfer. And secondly, the purpose of trying to stop that you have got these undertakings for is so that the sale to Peng Shing can go ahead. And I said, and you haven't got any titles transferred, because as soon as the law firm found out that this is what happened, they wrote straight off to the Registrar General of Land and said, oh, this is what's happening, stop it, stop it. We're trying to sell the titles, and they're not talking about the farmers anymore, they're talking about the titles again. We're trying to sell the titles to Peng Shing, and this will make her the registered proprietor, etc., etc. Well, the titles didn't transfer, but the reason for that was because the companies are in liquidation. Now, there's this technical stuff about in liquidation, the official assignee or has control over the your transactions. Now, if you're a company, those are the transactions of the company, right? And so I challenged the fact that the transfers didn't go ahead, and I challenged it on the basis that the transfers in commerce have to be between people who are debtors and creditors of each other. So there's nothing to stop us in this kind of common law, private way of operating, of doing anything we want. We're actually a lot freer out of the system than we are in the system. And since I've been declared bankrupt, I've found that is very liberating.
Well, have you noticed it's the hand that holds or was it? It's the hand you hold that is the hand that holds you down?
Perhaps, yes. Daddy hasn't been a very nice daddy. You know, Daddy state is pretty, want to slap you around the ears more than, and keep you doing what they want you to do rather than anything else. You know, it's certainly not, it's the fatherland rather than the motherland.
Yeah.
We know where the word the fatherland comes from, don't we?
Yes, and we all know that what the Department of Homeland Security is for.
Yes, yeah.
You know, it's basically like this. Whatever they want, it's for their benefit, not yours. It seems as though politics, the judiciary and the media have been working together quite some time to almost, I would say, abolish independence of any kind.
Yes, well, they didn't when they tried an injunction to get me shut up to say, you're not allowed to say anything. I had Justice Toogood, I was before Justice Toogood at that stage, and he was saying, no, we're not going to do that. That's, freedom of speech. Now, he was the only decent judge I got in front of. Hanson was the one who then, anyway, in the end, issued a judgment that said that he didn't understand what I was talking about, and he thought that the sale and purchase agreements weren't any good because the Crafars didn't have the right to sell. Well, then about on the 4th of July, a judgment came out called Westpac and Waterhouse and Westpac, where one of the people I'd done these $1 sale and purchase agreements with had put a caveat on and was defending the caveat on a buyback agreement. Well, it's a bit of a long story, and if you read, it's not a very long case, but basically what it said in the end, the judge in that case was Justice Bell. What he said was, if they'd had the right vendor, then the sale and purchase agreement would have been effective to convey the complete interest of the vendor, right? And he also says in that judgment that the interest of the bank and the interest of the fee simple owner are different. So what it said in the end basically was the sale and purchase agreements per se are absolutely fine, and I've had that confirmed to me by people who've looked at a lot more sale and purchase agreements than any of these judges. But he obviously didn't want it to go ahead. But I thought at the time, at least I've got the appeal, and we talked about the appeal a little bit. But of course, then they jumped up and down with the official assignee and said, no, you can't appeal it. The official assignee has to appeal it. So because I'd got the notice of appeal up, I'd got the grounds in, paid $1,000 or so to have it filed in the Court of Appeal. Then they started to say, no, you can't take it because it's all of your property vests in the official assignee. Well, in actual fact, I mean, that's like saying I own the farms, right? Because the claim was on the ownership of the farms. You still there? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, the claim was on the ownership of the farms. They're saying the appeal can't go ahead because it concerns a property, some of your property, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they've really shot themselves in the foot and not allowing, because then the official assignee came back and said, no, he didn't see any merit in the appeal. So they're all working together, ringing each other up and sending emails back and forth, etc., to say, oh, don't let her appeal. So I got a letter from the Court of Appeal the other day saying, well, the official assignee has said no, they're not going to take up the appeal. So under rule blah blah of the High Court of the Court of Appeal Act or whatever,
the rule blah blah of the
rule blah blah
of such and such,
you must sign as a party to the appeal. You've got to you should sign an abandonment and how the other side could help me do it perhaps. So or the official assignee would help me do it. So I just emailed them back and said, well, I'm not abandoning it. It's mine and. Anyway, I'm going to go for an annulment of my bankruptcy, right? Now, to do the annulment of your bankruptcy, now this is where the other carry-on comes in. They don't want me to annul my bankruptcy. I've had a windfall of $143,000, right, which will more than take care of anybody who's got a provable claim in my bankruptcy.
Yeah.
But the law firm who's got this in their hot little hand, Gibson Sheep, down in Wellington, are holding it. They got in touch with the official assignee and said, oh, look, she got this, but you don't want to take it, do you? And the official assignee turned it down.
See, the thing is, what people don't understand is that if things don't make sense, it doesn't mean that the person's stupid. It means that they're a frickin' madman.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, people give lawyers and doctors and these educated people the benefit of the doubt. Look, you have to do... I don't get that either. It means you're frickin' stupid, bro. It's the people that give them leeway that are stupid, and the people that are getting the leeway are the ones who are nuts. You know what I'm saying? The stupid people give the evil and crazy people leeway, and then the stupid people wind up getting fracked over by it all the time. And then the real smart people like you who actually notice the scumbaggery going on, actually go out, point at it, out to other people and things like that. You simply get the stupid people giving you no credit for that or whatever, and saying it's no, the madman couldn't do anything wrong or evil or scumbaggery. You know, that's never happened throughout history every single day. You know.
Yeah, so that's okay. So I'm pretty sure that if the official assignee won't take it, I can assign it. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't have to borrow any money to assign it, because this is what you get caught up with in your bankruptcy. You can't get any credit, basically. That's it. But if you, like, I've bought quite a few other places for $1 since this, and, you know, there's been toing and throwing. And they're saying, but, you know, how did you buy it? Well, give us a look at the sale and purchase agreement. I said, it's a sale and purchase agreement like I always do. It's always for $1. I didn't have to borrow any money. I'm not breaching the terms of my bankruptcy. They're dying to try and get me to breach the terms of my bankruptcy so that they can chuck me in jail for that then. So they're on the thing. But anyway, here's the very exciting stuff. Do you recall a few weeks back that the latest one they're crucifying is Barry Hart? Barry
No,
Hart, the QC, right?
no, I'm not aware of this.
Oh, he's a criminal lawyer, QC.
I love that term, criminal lawyer.
Yeah,
Like I also love the term criminal justice system.
yeah, yes, yeah. It's not tautology though.
Yeah.
Um, right. So anyway, I saw in the paper that he had got pinged by the banks, and 30 million of his property had got sold up in mortgagee sales. And one of the bits of property, the people who'd bought it at the mortgagee sale had tried to take it without a possession order, and they were seen off. And the cops were saying, no, we're not having anything to do with this. This is a civil matter. Well, there's a start, that the cops are finally getting their nose out of civil matters. So, but that was all right. But what interested me was he said he had a lease, which of course is what I always put in place for the people I buy property off. I don't go and live on any of these places as leases. So we're investigating equitable leases now as to ways what those mean. Now this whole area of equity is one that the commercial lawyers are absolutely useless at. Absolutely useless. I reckon commercial lawyers don't do law; they do deals.
Yeah. It's kind of like you don't have to be a lawyer if all you do is settle out of court.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's kind of like who's got the most money, who can do the most, dirty deals is how successful you'll be as a commercial lawyer.
Well, yeah, isn't that commercial law? Was that the reason for its establishment, is to allow those who, basically have all the commerce mostly already can eventually own the rest of it through scumbaggery?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the commercial lawyer will use the law and statute. They're because the commercial law is all set up under mercantile principles. So all commercial law is set up under mercantile, and so merchant bankers is beloved of merchant bankers, and basically, as we're a company in this country, New Zealand company, etc. It's really that's why I say the constitution of this country is the Companies Act. So it's all to make the company profitable.
Okay. Well, it just seems same. You know how sometimes you see the same thing over again, and instead of getting over it and changing it, you just wind up repeating yourself to a whole lot of people, hoping that they'll get it and help change it for you. What else
It's
are we
kind of
doing?
moving ahead, though. It's moving ahead because as each like the Crafar stuff has come to a bit of a grinding halt. I mean, what's happened with that? Yeah. So I don't know if I told you, but when I did the transfers, well, the Crafars and I did the transfers. The Minter Allison, who's the lawyers for the companies in receivership, jumped up and down and said, "No, stop her. We're trying to sell the titles, etc." And suggested to the Registrar General that he should put his own caveat on them to stop the titles moving, right? But they said, and I think it was this woman called Iva Rossick who works for them, said, but we actually don't want you to do that. We'd prefer that because we're trying to sell the titles and that could hold things up. And we just like you to have, keep a watching brief on those titles, right? Well, so I was in communication with the Registrar General. So then he wrote me back saying that he didn't agree with me about what I'd said about, it wasn't in commerce, and so, the transaction was okay. But he'd put his own caveats on there. So I thought, I got notification about the 4 farms that, I transferred but the transfers were rejected. When I went to investigate, I found out that all of the farms have got his caveats on. And how it actually came about was, it must have been when I was talking to him about, I bought the farms and now I've just decided to transfer the titles, because there's two processes. One is your sale and purchase agreement, and the other is the transfer of title, because the sale and purchase agreement is passing the fee simple, and the registration system is passing the certificate of title, which sits on, just describes the fee simple, if you like, or describes the land. So anyway, so he said, he'd put his on and sent me a copy. Well, then went further down the track. I can't remember when it was, maybe last month. I happened to find out that all of the caveats are on. There's caveats on all the farms, and my caveats that were taken off in February had been reinstated, and then taken off again and replaced with his within a couple of days. So I'm not exactly sure. It's called a departmental dealing, and I'm not exactly sure why they did that. But the whole effect of it is that there can be no danger of some clerk being bribed to transfer those titles off to Peng Shing. So those titles are all still sitting in the Crafar Farm's name.
What do you think is going to be the end result here? I mean, as far as I see it, they just simply want to steal the land and sell it. I mean, it reminds me actually of my friend Evelyn Gilbert when she was running a special effects company in the Netherlands, and the mafia came into the neighbourhood, bought the building, kicked out all the tenants, and they did the similar with other buildings around it. And then it made the property values around it go really, really, really low. And so they basically were able to buy up the neighbourhood because they bought one building, kicked everybody else, destroyed the business there, and then made off with the money, basically.
Yep.
Does that sound similar?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a country-wide thing. I mean... yeah, I think they still want to get plenty of income out of it, but they don't want to have to pay the workers anything much. They want us in some rented accommodation and working at the factory. You know. Yeah. Well, we're at the factory gate and we get in there every day, do our stuff, and then we go home. We don't go home.
Liz, I'd like you to see a lecture one of these days. I mean, I know you're real busy, love, and I don't want to obligate you with something, but it was a debate between these two sides of a false argument. Should we ban foreign investment in New Zealand from Chinese? Right, that was the debate. Yes or no, ban all Chinese investment. Just Chinese investment. Don't have a look at foreign ownership in general. Don't have a look at anything, right? Let's just ban Chinese investment. So the myopia of it is like this. This was the argument. Okay, we should ban Chinese investment and that kind of thing, and be very specific about it because we want farming to remain here in New Zealand. And it's like, well, hold on a second. They don't just invest in farming; they invest in so much of other things, stuff like that. And then they say, and any economic impacts that are caused, any negative economic impacts that are caused by banning specifically Chinese investment, will be made up by our free trade deals with China and stuff like that, which sell out our sovereignty and destroy the country. So let me get this straight. The argument is, you either A, sell off your strategic assets like farms, electricity, stuff like that you ain't building any more of, and once they're gone to foreign owners and stuff like that, you're screwed, and you're a tenant in your own country. Okay, so that's one side's argument. Let's become tenants in our own country. And the other side's argument is, let's get free trade deals which make us tenants in our own country.
Yep.
And these are the so-called intellectual elite. Those head university ducks type people who are the student leaders and the editors of the student magazines and stuff like that. They're the ones that are actually chairing this debate. They're going to be the leaders and the leaders of the National Party and stuff like that tomorrow. And it didn't occur to anybody that these people are completely stupid and or slash insane.
But we don't have to even debate it, as far as I'm concerned, because we can do what we can do, and we can still go along and buy somebody else's property off them. Now, what occurred to me today, and this is hot off the press. I was reading a case called Black versus the ASB Bank. Right. Now, Mr. Black had some sort of really good fishing company or something down in Whakatane, I think, and he had a deli, and he had, it was one of those real, let's get in there and do everything. And
in other words, he was a businessman who didn't dilly-dally.
Yeah, he didn't. Very good. So he had a trust, and he had they must have done quite well, and they had some property in Papamoa, and they had all this sort of stuff, right? And they borrowed a whole lot of money from the bank. And anyway, so it was one of those, I think it started off in 2009 that things started to really go bad from him. That sounds familiar, doesn't it, when they started to squeeze the credit?
Oh, yeah.
And so his business didn't go so well. Then they tried to keep the business going by selling off the property at Papamoa. Now, they sold it themselves. It wasn't a mortgagee sale, but it has probably cross-collateralised with the others. Sold it off. They realised something like 1.4 million out of it, which they paid to the bank, and they said, okay, now that takes care of, part of that. The agreement is that the bank will get rid of our personal obligations out of that. They won't just apply it all to the indebtedness of the companies. So anyway, so they lost a place in Papamoa. They paid the bank a whole lot of money. And that was that. And then the bank turned around and said, no, you're still personally indebted to us. And we want, X, Y, Z. And it must have been because they decided they wanted the company out of there, and they were going to take whatever they could get. So anyway, the argument was something about could the bank take the money and apply it as it wanted to, right? So they sold this place at Papamoa, and they, what did they say? It says, rather than the ASB sell the property forcibly, the trustees of it themselves sold it themselves and paid the sale proceeds to the ASB, right? Now, that property in Papamoa, do you think it could be foreclosed on?
What did they have?
They'd sold it to somebody else, right? They'd sold it to somebody else, so they couldn't.
So it wasn't their property.
No, well, it was their property, but they'd sold it and they'd applied the money, right?
Well, okay. so I don't understand. How can you sell something and still own it?
No, okay. So we agree, don't you, that once something is sold, it's sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, right, cool. Somebody has given you some money for it and you've agreed and it's sold.
It's their property now.
Yeah, it's their property now, right? Now, if I said to you, you sell me your property for $1 and we sign a sale and purchase agreement and I hand over the $1 and you pay that $1 into your bank in part satisfaction of your debt, yeah. Right? Can they sell that property again?
No.
No. right?
I
So
mean,
the
that's
step
simple. Is it that simple? I mean, this
so
is
the
this is the
step we've
case.
been missing out, and this is what I've got to talk to the Crafers about. The step we've been missing out is giving them the $16. He should have paid that $16 to the bank, and I've thought of it a few times, but it was just this morning the penny drops. And here's another quote from this case, and they're talking about some other money that um, the bank pinged them for to pay the bank's lawyers. You know how they do. They paid the bank's lawyers something like 96,000 in legal fees. It was Simpson Grierson actually. Um, and one of the judges is saying, I'm entitled to take into account that the bank is not assured of full recovery from the blacks. The bank carries the legal charges in the first instance without certainty of recovery from the blacks. But the banks always think they're going to get great big lumps of cash and they're going to go after the shortfall. They can still go after the shortfall, but they can't sell the property twice. And I've already got a judgment that says that.
Well, because that's a classic scam, isn't it? You go around with a car and you sell it to 3 or 4 people or something like that, and you collect all the money, and one of them winds up with the car, and everybody goes to that person who's got who actually gave the car to and tries to get it back off him.
Yeah. Well, you see, but the banks are setting people up at mortgagee sales in this way.
Yeah,
They're actually trying to sell something that has already been sold, and they have been told.
I think what they're trying to do...
They have been told in all sorts of ways, like these caveats. Caveats for leases, caveats for buybacks. We've tried to tell them so many ways. We've sent them letters that said it's already sold. But you can't sell it, they say. We didn't give permission. Too bad.
Well, they're just basically criminals, and with criminals I found they don't like being recorded.
No.
Are you recording your conversations with these lawyers and police and such and such?
Well, no, they don't talk to me. They just send me letters. In fact, they try not to talk. They try not to send me letters as well.
That's really dodgy behaviour, isn't it? And you'd expect, of course, if you had no experience of this world, you would expect those people that are in authority positions, in fiduciary levels of responsibility that are supposed to be telling the truth and know more about laws and know more about this, that, and the other than you, to actually be trustworthy because they're in that position of trust, right? You'd figure that'd be one of the requirements of the job. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. If you are untrustworthy and a criminal, you will find yourself quickly marching up the ranks in service of the bigger, badder, nastier criminals up there who have much longer-term plans and goals. And this long-term plan, in terms of New Zealand agriculture and indeed private ownership in general, is to amalgamate all remaining wealth into the hands of the banks through fake money and foreclosures. So let's say, for example, I wrote a piece of paper and said, this piece of paper is worth $500 million, and you agree to it and give it back, and then you take it and you say, hey, cool, this is worth $500 million. It's actually nothing. It's just a piece of paper. But you think it's worth $500 million. And then I come back to you and I say, hey, dude, I don't want that piece of paper back. I want the $500 million. So you've got to come up with 500 mil that you ain't got. Okay? That's actually the kind of thing that's happening now with the economic system. They make it up and then demand that you pay it back. And
demand that you come into the fantasy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think they believe it. I really think they believe it. I've talked to bank managers occasionally. I've had a few hang up on me, and so and I say, well, do you really think that it's that you're lending that it's actually anything but a bit of paper, that do you really think that it's worth anything? And they really don't like that. It really disturbs their equilibrium. But whether they want to keep living in fantasy land, it doesn't really matter, because as long as we're real.
Well,
You
I
know,
think it's
as long
like
as
if you,
and we understand the reality of the situation.
yeah. Well, I say interpret them as kind of like a mental patient. I mean, they need to be locked up and medicated, maybe.
Maybe.
More to the point, you do not go along with an insane person's fantasy.
No, not when it's hurting people the way it's hurting people. That's for sure.
Exactly. Because insanity, although you may believe something that doesn't exist, you're acting upon the things that don't exist can actually damage real things.
Well, that's right. I recall once down in it was a habeas corpus hearing, and the matter was that this woman was saying things on a blog that they didn't like, and I was saying to the court, but the legal test is she harming, a danger to herself or to others in the physical sense, right? And that's what the test is. And they said, oh, but you're not a doctor. I said, I don't have to be a doctor. This isn't a medical test. When you're talking about incarcerating somebody in a mental hospital, the legal test is, are they a danger to themselves or to somebody else in terms of physical danger? Okay, that's not, and that can include, somebody who doesn't feed themselves properly, neglects themselves as well as physically, wants to hurt themselves. And then, of course, it's quite clear, on the other side of it is, that they're a danger to other people and that they're physically a danger. If you see somebody walking around on the street and you don't like the way they wear their hair, that is not a danger, And yet we're getting into those areas of getting completely confused about what is dangerous and what's not dangerous,
Yeah.
Just because someone thinks differently from you, speaks differently from you, looks differently, that is not a danger to you. And if you think it is, then, you really need to be on the other side of the wall. Because, and then they do stuff to people that harms them, like they incarcerate people in mental hospitals because they've written stuff on their blogs or tried to expose a bad situation, and they say, oh, you're flaky, you're crazy. Right, in you go.
Throw away the key, hook up
Throw away the key, get the needles out,
Yeah, yeah, and it's just think about the comparable harm. Like, how much harm does one crazy person saying 9/11 is an inside job do versus how much damage do you do to them by beating them up, cutting their clothes off, having them naked around you while you force inject incredibly dangerous, untested psychoactive medications in them that can cause permanent damage. Who's the psycho here?
Yeah, exactly. That's the woman up in the north.
Maria Bradshaw, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, this other woman, and it seems to be women they pick on particularly in this one. She had a blog, and yeah, I mean, I didn't like, maybe you don't like some of the things that people say on their blog and that, but you don't have to read it. And I said to the court, I said, look, if it was a matter of that we got locked up because we said things that other people didn't like, and this was down in the court down in Wellington, and I pointed over to the beehive and said, most of those guys would be inside,
Well, the thing is, it's not supposed to swing both ways.
No.
Political correctness is so that you can't prove politicians wrong by telling the truth. That's what I've determined, and in so doing, you prevent truth and people's comfort with saying what they truly think. On top of it, forget the racism and calling people short or fat or whatever, and just trying to be nice about it. That's just window dressing to try and make people accept it. But what they really want to do is have anybody at all who says, you know what, this politician's lying to me, be instantly told by everybody else, you can't say that. That's not politically correct. You can't tell the truth. Without sugarcoating it.
Well, if you think of and replace the word political with power over others, which is really what politics is, authority, authoritarianism. That's not and just replace that with the thought of this is the situation where someone wants to have power over another. Okay, is it legit? Well, then if you don't think, um, if you say something that is not harming anybody else, and it's not designed to have power over another, then in actual fact, there's no reason you can't say it.
Yeah.
Because that power over another is a harmful thing.
You know what I'm concerned about?
People shouldn't pursue it.
Is that they're going to start doing this to people who say comments that you don't like on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. Oh, you're a dangerous, this is a hate crime, and you go to jail for a comment on Facebook. Hey, wait a second, did anybody get physically harmed? No. Anybody's property get damaged or taken out? No. Did you physically threaten anybody? No.
Yeah.
Then you're a criminal.
And the thing is too that even this Facebook, there's bullying and stuff like that. People's young ones should be told you don't actually have to carry a mobile phone around all of the time. You don't actually have to look at Facebook. You don't have to read any of that stuff. We used to have a little rhyme when I was a kid: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
I'm just like, we're getting too soft, right? That's my conclusion. Back in the day, have you ever heard of the saying, back in my day,
We say it a lot more these days. They've got few more days behind us. Well, I have anyway.
Well, the thing is, everybody's getting progressively weaker and wussier as time goes on. Because back in my day, I used to travel 15 kilometres by bicycle across a gravel road, and if the dog tried to attack me, I had to beat it off with my bare hands. Just like hardcore back in the day.
I mean,
people need to harden the frack up, as Chopper Reed would say.
They need to harden up. And they put all those claims in against me about, I was being nasty and malicious and disturbing the peace and tranquility of the workers on the farms and everything. I thought to myself, oh, for crying out loud, you guys, harden up.
What are you trying to do? You trying to save their jobs? Is that destroying peace and tranquility all of a sudden?
Oh, they had this guy. They dragged this guy along and about the trespass, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the things. I was supposed to be trespassing. Well, for a start, it's my land, so I can't trespass on it. But anyway, I just walked up to the front door but it's like, what? So what? Oh, they had to run. They were so disturbed they had to drive back from a family gathering somewhere, and we had all of this evidence about how he'd had to drive back from a family gathering because he was so disturbed that I'd come to the front door. I mean, I think I was on my own. Yeah, I think I was on my own. I don't think there was even anyone else in the car. It wasn't like I'd come with a mob of black power or mongrel mobs, or I better name them all so they won't think that I'm aligned with anybody.
What is it? Oh my God!
Some of the times I think these guys have been watching too much TV.
Yeah.
They think that the way they go on, you would think I had some sort of mobsters behind me or something that were.
I mean, maybe you should purchase yourself a Harley Davidson and get a facial tattoo or something,
I can't have anything more that's worth more than 6,000 at the moment.
Oh, okay.
And transport-wise. So if somebody might give me a cheap Harley Davidson. I suppose.
Yeah, a cheap Harley Davidson, otherwise known as a Charlie Davidson. All right, there we go.
Look at proper Charlie. So in terms of the farms, it's progressing. I hope that I'm giving them a few sleepless nights. The Crafars have got 4 leases. I've leased the rest of the farms to other people, but it's a matter of people, just hardening up. Just go, for goodness sake. There's nothing that can happen to them. Most people don't even know that the farms aren't sold to pension and never will be.
Now, what's your interpretation of Chinese ownership in New Zealand? Is it specifically Chinese that people should be concerned about? I think it's like just foreign ownership in general, because foreign owners.
It's corporate ownership.
Yeah.
Let's bring it down to,
Yeah,
what it
that's
really
good.
is.
That's good.
Yeah.
Can you
Because
elaborate on that? Yeah.
it's ownership by legal fictions. Those Crafar farms were family-owned farms. That was a real problem for them, because there's too much independent thought, there's too much, it's not standardised, right? They want to standardise everything. They want to bring it all into one big, New World Order, which is it was a corporate order. It's the rule of the dead, as far as I'm concerned. I always call the corporations the corporations. I don't think that money has no loyalty. Money has no nationality. I don't think it's anything to do with it. I think that we need to be able to enjoy the fruits of our labour, and under a corporation. If we're just, the wage slaves of a corporation, which is what we have to be if we haven't got any land left to make our living on, that's the problem for people in the city. Most of them haven't got anything to actually, they haven't got any resources to turn into something to make their way with. They've got to use, they've got brains and that, but mostly it's now turned to the service of as a wage slave. We gave up. They say that they gave up chattel slavery. They just turned it into wage slavery.
Yeah, well, it's a substituting. Basically, this is how scams work. If your scam gets discovered, you try the same scam again. Exactly the same scam, but on somebody who hasn't seen it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if you have a look back at communist Russia, Nazi Germany, and fascist Italy, the exact same methodology that is happening today in New Zealand, with the corporate ownership taking over everything and taking everybody's rights away and leaving everybody basically as serfs in wards of the state and what have you. It's identical, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
We are going to be exterminated, I feel, in quick succession if we have no power, because those without power cannot protect themselves.
Well, the leases that the ones I granted to the Crafars, they're called the Anzac Day leases. We signed them on Anzac Day, or close to. And, well, I signed my part on Anzac Day. And that is because the takeover is exactly as you described. It's the same old, same old. They might be in different generations, but they're controlled by the money power, by the slave power. They started off as a slave power, then they became the money power. And, the men and women who went offshore and the ones who stayed at home and kept the home fires burning, we regard them in spirit as Anzacs. And but I think the arms these days have to be, we have to do it without weapons these days. We have to actually change our mind and regard ourselves as warriors. But our enemy is a lot
unscrupulous,
a lot more shadowy, and unscrupulous. But they'll do the same with us as they intended to do with guns and tanks and concentration camps.
Well, the thing is, it's about force.
They do the same thing.
Force is something that you use in defence or retaliation, never initiative. And that's what I feel the way that you prevent wars from happening is simply don't start them, and they don't happen.
Well, I don't think we need to pick up any guns. I don't think we need to pick up anything like that. We just have to realise that we have free will. We don't have to ask anybody if we can do something. And if we know right from wrong, and we know that we're not hurting anybody, and we can be absolutely sure of that if we actually just spend our time thinking about what we could do for somebody else.
Indeed.
And then we know that we can't be hurting somebody.
Yeah, well, I think it's if you live in your life in service and gratitude to others and trying to help them every way you can, the likelihood of you hurting them is extremely low. However, if you're devoting yourself in service to others but you don't know what you're doing and you're simply being ordered by somebody else to do it, the likelihood of you actually damaging people is much, much higher because you don't actually know how to do good. You're simply brainwashed into being told that you are doing good, even if you're doing nothing but bad. And that's the police and judges and lawyers and doctors and all of these other people, politicians, whatever. They think that the system is actually helping them to help others, when in actual fact, it's only turning them into pawns to be used by the evil scumbaggery agents that really made the system and built it in the first place as something to gradually turn what was once free, what was once sovereign, which was once prosperous, into a dark age with no freedom, no private property, no choices forever. That's what I feel is going on here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, on that depressing
let's
note,
be cheerful and say, okay, has anybody out there got a problem with, the bank and doesn't mind going bankrupt? Because that's the only thing they can do to you in the end, is say, okay, you still owe us all this money, and but you're just a tenant in that place now to your mate that bought it off you for $1 or a couple of dollars. So if people, but it's not a really uncomfortable place to be. Most of what we've got to overcome is our fear. That's really it, and we're doing the fear stuff. We're not. People, think, oh, I'm afraid because somebody else is going to do something to me. In actual fact, there's not much that can be done to you. What you're going to do is it's your reaction to what other people do. That's really most damaging. I've found myself doing a lot of counselling for these people who have got really afraid and say, oh, but what will the bank do and what will the court do and blah 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 blah. Well, they'll do what they can do, but you've really got to stand up and be brave and say, well, it's my fear that's the most uncomfortable thing about all of this.
the more poignant question is, what will they do if they're not stopped?
Yes. Yeah, well, that's right, I've had Sky recently, and the History Channel, and what they've now they're bringing forward about the technical aspects of Nazi Germany and the concentration camps, etc. Is you've just got to stop. It's got to stop, because that's where we are heading, for sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, Liz. Well, thank you very much for some of your time today. And if there's any
nice
finals,
talking to you.
Anything else you'd like to get out there before we go?
Well, I'd like to be cheerful and say, look, you've nothing to fear but fear itself, and you're producing most of it.
That's true. Liz Lambert, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, Vinny. Bye. Telling actually talking about it, putting stuff online, talking to people about it, concluding leases, etc., putting caveats on, was all to do with the fact that my sale and purchase agreements were legal documents, and I was telling the truth. So we got down to that in the end, and it was set down for a 3-day hearing. Well, it got disposed of in one day because in the meantime, I had actually transferred 4 of the farms. Well, I hadn't transferred them. The transfer is executed by the Crafars to me of 4 of the farms, and I have leased them back to them on 99-year leases. So they went through the LIN system. The receivers got most upset and said, "Oh, that's breaching the undertaking." Well, the lawyers for the receiver said, "That's breaching the undertaking that she gave, and she should be jailed." So if there was any for breach for what do they call it? The court contempt of court. Well, it would actually only be a civil contempt anyway. So I mean, the whole thing of jailing somebody over a civil contempt is a bit ridiculous.
Yeah. It's like, come on, I'm just being a little bit
Yeah,
contemptuous.
yeah. Well, I wasn't even going to admit that because I said when I signed I was quite careful that before I went ahead and went with the transfers, which I hadn't thought of doing before then, I had a look at that. And it didn't say that I couldn't transfer any of the titles. It said that I shouldn't deal with any of the titles so as to stop the sale, right? So then on the cross-examination, when Mr. Stewart had me up there in the dock saying, well, isn't it true that you've committed you've breached your undertaking here? And I said, no, I haven't actually. I said, for a start, I haven't specifically said I wouldn't transfer or get a transfer. And secondly, the purpose of trying to stop that you have got these undertakings for is so that so that the sale to Peng Shing can go ahead. And I said, and you haven't got any titles transferred because as soon as the law firm found out that this is what happened, they wrote straight off to the Registrar General of Land and said, oh, this is what's happening, stop it. Were you trying to sell the titles? And they're not talking about the farms anymore, they're talking about the titles again. We're trying to sell the titles to Peng Shing and this will make her the registered proprietor, etc., etc. Well, the titles didn't transfer, but the reason for that was because the companies are in liquidation. Now, there's this technical stuff about in liquidation, the official assignee or has control over your transactions. Now, if you're a company, those are the transactions of the company, right? And so I challenged the fact that the transfers didn't go ahead, and I challenged it on the basis that the transfers in commerce have to be between people who are debtors and creditors of each other. So there's nothing to stop us in this kind of common law, private way of operating, of doing anything we want. We're actually a lot freer out of the system than we are in the system. And since I've been declared bankrupt, I've found that is very liberating.
Well, have you noticed it's the hand that holds or was it? It's the hand you hold that is the hand that holds you down?
Perhaps, yes. Daddy hasn't been a very nice daddy. Daddy state is pretty, want to slap you around the ears more than, and keep you doing what they want you to do rather than anything else. It's certainly not, it's the fatherland rather than the motherland.
Yeah.
We know where the word the fatherland comes from, don't we?
Yes, and we all know that what the Department of Homeland Security is for.
Yes, yeah.
It's basically like this. Whatever they want, it's for their benefit, not yours. It seems as though politics, the judiciary and the media have been working together quite some time to almost, I would say, abolish independence of any kind.
Yes, well, they didn't when they tried an injunction to get me shut up to say, you're not allowed to say anything. I had Justice Toogood, I was before Justice Toogood at that stage, and he was saying, no, we're not going to do that. That's, freedom of speech. Now, he was the only decent judge I got in front of. Hanson was the one who then anyway, in the end, issued a judgment that said that he didn't understand what I was talking about, and he thought that the sale and purchase agreements weren't any good because the Crafars didn't have the right to sell. Well, then about on the 4th of July, a judgment came out called Westpac and Waterhouse and Westpac, where one of the people I'd done these $1 sale and purchase agreements with had put a caveat on and was defending the caveat on a buyback agreement. Well, it's a bit of a long story, and if you read it, it's not a very long case, but basically what it said in the end, the judge in that case was Justice Bell. What he said was, if they'd had the right vendor, then the sale and purchase agreement would have been effective to convey the complete interest of the vendor, right? And he also says in that judgment that the interest of the bank and the interest of the fee simple owner are different. So what it said in the end basically was the sale and purchase agreements per se are absolutely fine, and I've had that confirmed to me by people who've looked at a lot more sale and purchase agreements than any of these judges. But he obviously didn't want it to go ahead. But I thought at the time, oh, well, at least I've got the appeal, and we talked about the appeal a little bit. But of course, then they jumped up and down with the
I'm here today again for a follow-up call with the illustrious and lovely Liz Lambert, with a little alliteration as well. Liz, welcome back.
Thank you, Vinny.
So what's on the card now?
Well, Vinny, you know how I actually thought at the time that putting the Crafar Farm conspiracy headline was a little OTT, but I absolutely not. I would have never have believed it if I hadn't lived it. I think when I spoke to you last time, we were in the process of, the receivers' lawyers were in the process of trying to get before the court, and what they wanted the court to declare the sale and purchase agreements null and void. They went about that in a very devious way. They brought a whole lot of these claims about that I was destroying the farm's business, that I was maliciously saying that I owned the farms, and et cetera, et cetera. Because they didn't want to come out and say, well, what's really bothering us are these sale and purchase agreements. In the end, they, through a series of moves, in the end they dropped all of that because we argued it in the interlocutory, which is the sort of in-between stages of the main event, and it was quite clear that they had nothing to base them on, because I was saying, well, everything I did in terms of writing letters to the share milkers,